Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the second session hosted by the Fountain Pen Association of India, Shooting from the Net. Today, we have a wonderful person with us. He is such a gem, and he is one of the best persons you could hope to have around you if you have a vintage pen to restore, repair, or to have any questions regarding vintage pens. So, today we have with us Mr. Siamack Zahedi. Welcome, Siamack. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me, guys, and such a nice, generous welcome you gave.
Exactly. And we also have with us Pradeep Dubula and we also have
Hello.
with us Subodh
Hi
Khanolkar.
guys.
How are you guys?
Good.
How's everybody doing today?
Excited. We are very keen for a class about vintage pens and the masters
Exactly.
himself.
How about you, Subodh?
Pretty good. Just waiting to hear from Siamack.
Exactly. So let's get started with the session today. So I'll just start out with the first question, Siamak.
Mhm.
So first of all, how did you get into fountain pens, and then why vintage pens, and how did you get into restoration? Can you just talk about that a bit?
Yeah. So fountain pens, honestly, when I was in middle school, even I had the worst handwriting, but for some reason, I wanted to have a nice fountain pen. And I remember my first fountain pen was a Parker. I don't remember what exactly it was, probably like a 75 or something. And I had a Sheffer, and I had terrible handwriting, but that was the time that I had fountain pens. Then many years later, just 4 years ago, I was at just passing through William Penn at one of these big malls, and I stopped by because I'm generally I've been fascinated with fountain pens and just stuff that is analog, mechanically. Like I was very into photography and I had manual SLR cameras. I'm very fascinated by automatic watches, by vintage motorbikes. So I think they all have something in common. Anyway, I walked into the store, looked at the pens, and I bought this Sailor Sapporo that time, the small Sailor. And when I bought it, then I started reading about pens. So I went online and I found Fountain Pen Network. And that's really when I got like really interested because suddenly I had this ocean of information in front of me. And then I started reading about pens that people are using that are like 80 years old and 90 years old. It was just fascinating. So I started reading, and then I made that one big mistake of going on to the classifieds section. And I saw this vintage 1950s Mont Blanc for sale. It was a 342. And I was like, really, $120? You can get like a 70-year-old pen? And I bought it from this dealer in Portugal, and he sent it to me. And I was like, will it even reach me? God knows when. It took weeks, and I forgot about it. And then it did reach me. And when I opened it up and tried it, it wasn't working well. The tines were very misaligned. And so I was thinking to myself, what should I do? I can't send it back. Should I just try fixing it? And I tried fixing it. I did some crazy stuff. I don't know what I must have done. Stuff that no one should do probably to their pens. But it fixed. And that rush that I got at that time and that feeling that I got of success in there's a 70-year-old pen that I felt like I just brought back to life. And it was such a wonderful pen. I still have it. I'll show it to you guys. That's really what got me into fountain pens and into vintage pens. And that was also what got me into restoration because suddenly I thought, I'm like, wow, I'm good at this. So that's what started the disease, I think. And from there, it was just more reading. It was a lot of mentoring and support by super generous people from the fountain pen community on FPN. I mean, experts, people with decades of experience, just freely sharing information. You can put posts up and they'll reply. That's really how it started for me.
All right, great. Now that was really fascinating about how you got into vintage fountain pens. But there's something very interesting that you do, and that is pen restoration, right? Now that's a very difficult task, and I don't know if people know this, but Siamak is actually a very busy person. He's actually a holder. He holds a PhD in education, He's actually an education leader and a learning scientist. He works in schooling reform and development, and he's also a co-CEO and director of education and research at the Acres Foundation in Mumbai. He's actually a very busy person, and his hobbies also encompass a lot of things. Now, in this, how did you teach yourself fountain pen restoration? That's the first question. And there was something that you did on Fountain Pen Network, which was very interesting, and that was your paid forward, let's call it a program, and or offer. It was so generous. You actually offered your services to people to repair their fountain pens for free. And there have been people who have said that you have actually spent money out of your pocket to repair their fountain pens and not even charged them anything. So how was this entire experience? Given all your other activities, and then managing that, and then getting into pen restoration, handling such really expensive pens, and then doing it for free, and then if something went wrong, you splurge from your own pocket, or even if it did not go wrong, if you just could source them part by yourself, you spent on it and refused to take money. So could you just talk about that a bit?
Yeah, well, when I fixed that first pen, I was very interested in restoration. So I started buying more vintage pens. And when you buy vintage pens, honestly, normally, something or the other will be not perfect. You're going to be little dissatisfied with something, if you're lucky. And if you're not very lucky, then there'll be some moderate amount of work that has to be done. So when I started buying pens, I started learning how to restore them. Now, what was happening is I started enjoying the process of restoration more than collecting. And I had a strange problem then, that I started buying pens just so I can restore them. I said, this is ridiculous, right? So I said, how can I just restore pens without having to buy them? I'm a big believer in win-win relationships. I'm not like some altruistic guy, or who's going to sacrifice and martyr himself for anything. But I'm always looking for win-win arrangements and relationships. So I was on Fountain Pen Network, and they have this forum for just paid forward, PIF, where people are just giving stuff away, right? For whatever reason, they have too many pens, they want to give it away, and they just give stuff away. So I said, what if I've repaired about 50, 70 pens of my own. So it's not like I'm going to be reckless with someone else's pens. What if I just offer free restoration? Because I'm sure there are people out there who need restoration work done, but they don't want to spend half the amount of a pen to restore it, right? What if I restore pens like that? So I put this restoration ad up on PIF, and and I was very surprised that people started writing into me, and it started with 1 pen and 2 pens, 3 pens. People from India started sending their pens to me, and for me it was like being like almost like a detective, right? It was like, firstly, it's like this whole making sort of engagement where you use your hands and your mind at the same time, and I feel like everyone needs to do something that's maker oriented, whether it's woodworking or something, art, or I don't know, whatever it is. So I started getting really, into this, and they were sending me their pens. Now, they knew I wasn't a professional. I told them, I said, look, there's a risk, but I'll do my best, and I did my best. But sometimes it was just, the pen was beyond repair, or it was too complicated for me. And once or twice I did make some mistakes. And honestly, I was doing this because I just enjoyed the process. And I was grateful to people that sent it to me, because I really appreciated their trust in me and their encouragement in me. And it wasn't at all transactional. No one sent the pen and said, "Arey, so many days, what's it?" No one talked like that. It was very respectful. It was like, two passionate people talking about something they care about. And so money was never really a factor. Also, I knew once money starts coming to the picture, I'll start hating this. It'll become like a job. I have enough work already. So once or twice I made some mistakes, and I really wanted that person to have a fully functional, awesome pen back. So I sent it for professional repairs myself, and I made sure that person gets that pen back, back to life in great condition. And again, the reason I did that is because I wanted more people to trust me. So I wanted people to know that if I do make a mistake, which I'll pay for getting it right. Even though that's not my commitment to you, I might do that. So that's how that whole thing happened. And then it just really took off. So when people started posting back on that PIF forum that, he fixed the pen and I loved it, I started getting people from pens from Japan, from all over India, from all over the US even. And it started becoming really fun. And I think the whole, the number of pens from India started picking up once I met you guys, actually, and I got into the Indian pen community. So that is how that whole experience took up, and it was wonderful. Everyone is so encouraging at least the people I met in the FPN, in the international and Indian community. Everyone was so grateful when you sent the pen back to them. They were so patient. They were so kind. If I made a mistake even, they were like, no, it's fine. How else will you learn? And, it was so wonderful, the connection. I really enjoyed that. And the PIF is still up. I changed it now into a pay as you wish instead, because I want to, I promised myself that I'll be more responsible with how much money I spend on my hobby. And I said that maybe if I do a pay as you wish, and some people will want to give me money for the service I do, then I can use that money to buy more pens for myself. So the pay as you wish has been wonderful, because people were telling me, just charge, straight up money for what you do, tell people a price. And I don't want it to get into that. So it's too transactional for me to do something like that with a hobby. So the pay as you wish was that you send me the pen, I'll assess it, I'll repair it, I'll send it back to you. If you like it, and if you want to contribute, you contribute whatever you want to, right? And people have actually been very generous, really generous in their contributions. And again, even that's heartwarming, right? It's encouraging, not the money. It's so encouraging and heartwarming that someone appreciated your work enough to give you that, as a token. So I'm loving this.
That is really amazing, because as fountain pen collectors, we actually really baby our pens. Well, I'm not really into vintage pens, but whenever I buy a pen that I was searching for a long time or hankering for, and the moment I get it, it's really it's a sense of achievement and a huge sense of satisfaction to have that pen in my hand. And although I have never been in fountain pens, I can imagine maybe my favorite pen 20, 30 years down the line. And if there is something wrong with it, how I would feel if I'm giving it to somebody, and whether it is going to be done properly or not. So it is really a testament to your skill, knowledge, and patience that you have been able to garner such trust from people and have been able to deliver such amazing results. Right now, moving on to the next part of today's session, we have Subodh here who wants to ask you something. And to all the viewers, if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them and write them in the comments in the live sections, and we will take them up as soon as we can. Thank you. Subodh, go ahead.
Siamack, it was fantastic to, even the passion with which you were telling us about the PIF and the experiences you have had, and doing it as a hobby, restoring other people's pens because you love to restore pens, doing something with your hands. Fantastic. So on this same line, you have restored so many pens so far. I would like to ask you, which is the most memorable pen that you have, restored? It could be memorable for any reason. So, which is the most memorable pen, and the other part of it, which has been the most challenging restoration as well? We would like to hear about that.
Yeah, sure. The most memorable pen was when I started collecting, getting more into Mont Blancs. Actually, the one I was fascinated with the celluloid Mont Blancs from the 1950s, right? So like your 142, 144, 146, 149. Now, when I was still a novice collector and novice restorer also, right? Novice. For me at that time, a grail pen, an absolute grail pen, was the 146 celluloid from the 1950s, with the lovely long ink window. Beautiful. I love that pen. It's literally my favorite pen even today for my whole collection. So, but I could never afford it at that time. It was too ridiculous. Most of the pens I would buy at that time were like between $100 to $150 tops, at that time. These pens were selling for about $600, $500. So I was like, it's not going to happen. Then on eBay, I found this one seller who was selling a 146G with the pencil set, where he said that the telescopic piston is not working. So I said, you know what, this might be my chance. So I wrote to him. I said, see, I don't want the pencil. You sell it separately and you make some money out of that. And the telescopic piston is not working means this pen is pretty much done. It's a huge risk for me. So sell it to me for half the price. And he did some drama, but then he agreed. So I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Now I'm actually going to get my Grail pen. And I got it. The telescopic piston wasn't working. And I had never disassembled a celluloid Mont Blanc or any pen that was that expensive or that valuable rather, right? So what I did is I posted on FPAI and I started a thread on Fountain Pen Network. And I called it my journey into restoring my 146G. And I called it a journey because I felt like this was going to take a while and it was going to be quite an interesting journey. And I put my problem up. I say, guys, I just can't get the section open. Forget about the telescopic part. That was no chance. But I can't get the section open even, And then the experts from around the world, Francis Guzens and, guys from Portugal and all the best guys on FPN were writing in with ideas and tips. And then I would try something. I would soak it for 2 days and then I'd give an update. And you can still find that post. It's quite interesting. You'll see it's like 6 pages of updates and then responses and then one more obstacle I've hit. Now what do I do? And then 3-4 suggestions and then, this worked. But now this is the obstacle. You can literally see like every tiny speed bump and how the network and the community helped me get over it. And eventually I restored that pen. So to me, that was definitely the most memorable experience. A lot of people told me I was crazy to try restoring it myself. And I said, hey, listen, if I'm going to learn how to restore a telescopic piston, I have to try restoring a telescopic piston, right? I mean, how else do you learn? There's no like teacher to go to. So that was the most memorable. I've had some pretty challenging pens. I think the most challenging, and it's quite funny that you were asking the question, but the most challenging actually and satisfying amongst them was the pen that you sent me, Subodh. It was it's a simple pen and a simple repair actually, simple enough. It was a vacuum fill Sheffer, but there was something strange about it. The filling, the packing unit. Normally, you get these certain sides. Yeah, there you go.
Incidentally, I have it right on my desk right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I didn't expect you to say that would have been
it actually is, because it was like this 5-month or like 4-month detective thing for me, right? Because I was like, okay, we ordered the parts from the UK and I've done like 10 vacuum fills and they're tricky to do, but I know how to do them. I said, why is this happening? What is the deal? And in situations like that, over time, I learned the moment you feel like you hit a roadblock, don't try using force. You need to walk away from the pen, right? And it's got to just like bounce around in your head. You're having a shower, you're thinking about it. You're taking a nap, you're thinking about it. You're walking to the gym, you're thinking about it. It's one of those kind of projects. And for 4 months, I was trying to figure out why this pen is not getting fixed. And then finally, one member on FPN, and again, an expert actually, he gave me an idea. And from that idea, I got another idea. And I actually got a piece of hardware milled that required me to do something quite risky. And, like I said, many members are so generous and trusting, just like you. And you said, just go for it. I trust you, go for it, And I said, let me just try this. And basically, I had to go in blind through the barrel with something that was going to shave away the inside diameter of the packing unit without being able to see it. So I'd have to feel it literally like this. And I did it. Some stuff came out when I took it out. And I was like, was this really going, like, is it possible? Did you really think this was going to work? And let's try it. Let's put this stuff in and see. And I put the unit back in with all the pieces, and it actually worked. And it was one of those crazy moments where, I went out with my wife. I was like, I'm really good at this. In my delusion, I'm not very good at this, but I was like, I think I'm really good at this. I'm really good at this. So that was a very satisfying, very complicated but satisfying repair for me.
I'm glad it was satisfying, and I enjoy using this pen a lot. So thanks a lot for that. So coming to our next question, and I think you have referred to this somewhere during the last few minutes. Most of us know that you have had a very good collection of vintage pens even before you decided to move your focus onto Moblas, and then now you are focusing purely on vintage Moblas. So what made you take this call? What prompted you? What inspired you to decide that this is something that most of us as fountain pen users, this is the signal of it is a signal of something that most of us try to look for. Okay, these are the type of pens that I want, and you have found that, and you are going in that direction. So how did you find it? What was the inspiration?
Yeah. Well, so I had about 100 pens in this cabinet of mine, and Parkers, Covecos, Sheffer, Waterman. I loved Waterman, Mont Blancs, and a bunch of other pens. Really wonderful. Those vintage pens are all so beautiful. And but every time I went to pick out a pen to write or use, I just found myself constantly going back to the old Mont Blancs, the 1940s, 50s Mont Blancs. So then it reached a point where I said, look, I'm just spending too much money on this hobby, right? And it's stupid to have a hobby that is about buying stuff. Like that to me seemed dumb. That was the dumbest part. It's still, even today, it's the worst part of the hobby for me, right? And that's why I do other stuff like the website and, restoration, because it allows me to engage with pens without just spending money on it. So I said, okay, you're just picking up Mont Blancs, and now there's 20 Mont Blancs you want, it seems, because you've been reading more about them, and now you're just obsessed with them, right? How are you going to buy them? I said, there's no way I'm going to spend more money on buying these pens. I cannot have such a crazy collection. So I said, let's focus the collection. And then I started selling off all the other brands, and I started using the same money to buy more Mont Blanc. So literally till 7 months ago, in the past 4 years, my budget on my investment in pens hasn't moved. It was the same 3 years ago, and it was the same 6 months ago. Because I literally was selling to buy pens. And I decided that I would only buy pens that were mid to high tier, because they would hold their value also over time better than the lower pens. And I would have less pens, but I would have pens that every time I opened, I would really be, just that butterflies in my stomach kind of thing, right? There's no point having 80 pens and getting lost in them. So that was the idea, to reduce the collection. And I still had some pens from the 60s and 70s, Mont Blancs, and 80s, 90s. I had a Heritage also, which is very modern. But again, I wasn't going to them. So I said, listen, I think that you just like Mont Blancs from 1959 and before. Because 1960s, when they really came out with a different set of designs for the pens. Till 1959, the celluloid torpedo shapes were still ruling, the design thing. So I realized 1959 and before, everything else goes. I use that money to buy pens. 6 months ago, I exhausted that budget, so now I'm actually spending money to add pens. But I'm very careful. I would like to think I'm very purposeful about how I curate my collection. And my goal is to have as few pens as possible in my collection, as small a collection as possible, but as much diversity in terms of design and technology as possible at the same time. So very often these two compete with each other, but I'm trying to be really clever about it. So let's see. That's where it is right now.
Fantastic. For the viewers, difference between an accumulator and a collector, that is what Siamack told us about right now. So fantastic. So Yeah, on this note, we would be happy to see a few of the lucky ones from your collection if possible.
Yeah, sure. I have them over here. I don't have many pens actually, so it's a good thing. I just have like 20 odd pens. Let me show you stuff that is unique. So let me start. There are basically 4 or 5 main filling systems. Right? So I wanted to have every technology, every filling system between 1959 and before. And there are a few key ones. So for example, I'll show you this pen here. This is from the 1920s. Very lovely. It's an eyedropper, right? And you see this lovely imprint on the barrel, nice crisp imprint,
Right.
hard rubber, Simplo original. It's a number 2 eyedropper. Now, it's not a safety though, right? See, these guys used to have the big stars, the early pens. It's not an eyedropper. It's not of safety. It's literally an eyedropper. So if you open this up, you'll see a very interesting technology here that they used, which is the barrel is an eyedropper. You just fill it with ink. But this little guy here, right, he goes little in, little out. You can push him in, push him out. And he regulates the amount of ink that gets into the feed. And I thought this
Very
was just,
interesting.
yeah, I thought it was so fascinating. And Montblanc actually used 1 or 2 other types, iterations of this when they were making pure eyedroppers like this before safety pens, right? And I'll show you the difference
So,
between a
Sam, I'm
safety.
sorry to interrupt you for a minute there. Could you also tell us the models of the pens that you'll be showing us?
Yeah, so this is a number 2. This is a number 2 eyedropper. This is from the 1920s. Okay, it's a pure eyedropper. Now, let me show you just to sort of compare. Let me show you a safety. This here is an octagonal. So you see the octagonal shape. This is an octagonal number 2. You can't see the 2, but yeah. You see the 2, and there's a J. The J represented the special nib on this pen. Okay, it's a pretty short pen. You see here, not too big. The reason I buy medium to small size pens, honestly, because they're just much cheaper. If I bought this in the size 6, it would be like 5 times the price, right? So for me, like I said, I want as much diversity as possible. I don't need to have the biggest pen. And if you open this, you see now this guy is a safety. Why? Because he's an eyedropper. You still have to drop the ink into his barrel. That's still the reservoir. And then you turn the knob down, and the beautiful safety comes up. And it's a special nib. It's a J nib. As you can see, let me try to get the reflection out if I can. Yeah, so you see the J on the nib. And the J nib was supposed to be a calligraphy nib. So the difference between this safety and that pure eyedropper was that the pure eyedropper, it didn't have this technology where the nib goes back in and comes out. Right? This was developed later to make the pen seal better and leak proof. That was the idea behind it, basically. That's why they call it a safety, I guess. So those eyedroppers are actually quite rare. Safeties are still much more common, but those eyedroppers are quite rare. So these are both from the 1920s. Then from the 1920s, there's another very special pen. This was a Grail pen. I never thought I would get this. I got this in terrible condition, and that's why I was able to afford it. And I did some pretty crazy restoration to this pen. This is a compressor. It has a lovely clip from the 1920s, as you can see. Right? Again, the big star. All these 1920s have this lovely big star. I love these big stars. This is a number 4, as you can see there. And the compressor is a very interesting pen because, at that time, these pneumatic fillers were very popular for the other brands also. As you can see the number 4, right? These pneumatic fillers are becoming popular, right? Like the vac fills and the snorkels and whatnot later on. later on, but pneumatic fillers were becoming quite popular. So Mont Blanc made its own pneumatic filler, which is, as you see this, there's a hole here, as you can see. You put your finger on the hole, and then you push it in. And as you push it in, it creates a vacuum. It has a sac inside, and the ink goes up, just like the other iterations of pneumatic fillers. Now, this is a rare pen. The compressor was only made for about 2 years, 2-3 years max. So it's very rare to get this pen. It's a rather large pen, even though it's a number 4, and it's quite massive, and it's heavy because that mechanism is all brass. So it's a very interesting pen. So now I showed you an eyedropper as technology. I showed you a safety as technology. I showed you the compressor as a technology. Now the lever fillers. Other brands, lever fillers are very common. Waterman, right? Other brands, common. Mont Blanc was not excited about the lever filler. For some reason, they wanted to avoid it. But the pressure from the market made them make it. So they made it for a few years. And this tiny guy is my example of a lever filler. You see the lever here? Right? This comes up. And just like a normal lever filler, it works. Now, this pen I also bought because I wanted the size adds diversity to my collection. So if you see, this is my finger. This tiny little guy is my pinky. Better. Right? And this is the size 0 pen. Mont Blanc actually made a size 1 smaller than this. It's even more ridiculously smaller than this pen. But I wanted this one because it had the size 0. It's very cute, tiny little nib. Size 0 nib. I don't think the camera can focus. But anyway, it says 0. It's a tiny little guy. So this is a lever filler. This is the other type of filling technology that they used. Again, big star because we're talking about the 1920s, right? Then Mont Blanc got into the piston, right? And it started with a simple piston. So this pen here it's a blue marble 333.5, right? But the reason I'm showing this one to you is because it has the simple piston, right? Just a simple guy like this. Push it up, it goes up inside, as you can see with the cork, right? Put it back down, and that's that. Simple. You have to screw out this blind cap and then access the piston. Now, in the 30s, Mont Blanc came up with, because everything they did, they had to do better than everyone else, right? They were really, that's what I loved about vintage Mont Blancs. They were so innovative and they pushed themselves to be innovators in design. So Pelican actually came up with the piston mechanism as a technology in the 20s, late 20s. And Mont Blanc had to obviously, step up and do its thing, but they had to do something different, right? So in their Meisters took the top line in the 1930s. They created the best piston, a piston which allows almost double the capacity of normal pistons. And that was the telescopic piston, right? So for that, I have for you a 136. So this again was the 13X series, the 132, 4, 6, 9. They were the precursors to the 142, 4, 6, 9. See this tie clip, which is very characteristic. I love the long ink window. I don't know if you can see the lines in this one clearly, but it's a long ink window. And this one has a telescopic piston. So the blind cap doesn't come off, right? You just take it off and you start turning it, and it engages the piston inside, which goes up. And it's too much to get into the details of this piston, but basically the technology allowed for a much higher ink capacity to fill. I have an interview on my website. There's an interview I did with Francis Guzin, who's a mechanical expert, really makes his own pens, And he loves the telescopic piston. He's explained it there. So in case you want to learn more about that, you can go there. So those are a few filling systems. Another filling system is the push knob. So we all know the button filler, right? The button filler, you take out the blind cap and you push that steel button, right? Again, Montblanc has to do something special. So they created a button filler, but it was called a push knob, where this doesn't separate. You open this, you disengage. So it's like this normally. You loosen this, right? And it turns into a button. You press the button and it sucks in the ink. So they advertised it as you only need one hand to operate this and you don't have to worry about losing blind caps. So they put this kind of button filler, this push knob, on their higher tier pens. And the lowest tier pens still had button fillers, right? So, for example, if you see this Danish coral red pen, 216 from the 40s. This is like your standard button filler, you see. Blind cap separate, this separate. But the push knob was special. And they had to make it special because they wanted to put it on their top line, their Meisterstroke. Now, this is a 126 platinum line. For me, this has been a grail for forever. I'm obsessed with this color. I think it's just amazing. It's mesmerizing. Every time I open it, it's just, I'm in love with this, all over again. And you'll notice it doesn't have an ink window because it has a sack inside. That's how it fills. It's basically a button filler, but it's a push knob, like I showed you earlier. So you push this, it sucks up the ink. This one has a lovely double broad cursive almost nib. Right? Camera's struggling to focus, I know. And this is your typical two-toned 1950s, 1940s nib. Or 1930s, I guess, with this pen. Right? So this is one of my absolute favorite pens. So between all these pens, you'll notice I got all the filling mechanisms that were made. There's one mechanism I don't have, which is literally the first pen that they made in 1908. I've been trying very hard to get that. I don't think I will get that for another decade. It costs astronomical amounts of money. It's a sliding barrel. Like if you've seen the Moore safety pens, the sliding
right.
sliding barrel that they made in 1908. Insanely expensive to buy.
Yeah.
But yeah,
fantastic pens though. Fantastic pens though. So whatever you have shown us so far, I mean, very tasteful, and the diversity that you're mentioning.
Oh, thank you.
Much, yeah.
So I got technology, and then I have pens that were manufactured in different places. Manufactured in Germany, obviously, but Denmark did a bit of a manufacture sort of stint. Spain
right.
a little as well, and France did a little as well. So I got from that, and then just different design elements, and that's really how I put the collection together.
Fantastic, and I hope you get the 1908 pen as well very soon.
Yeah, one day.
yeah. So coming up to the next question, you have mentioned something about this again during the talk. You have a very comprehensive website dedicated to vintage Montblancs. So how did you go around doing that? Tell us something a bit about that journey.
Yeah, basically I was 2-3 years into the hobby, and like I said, I don't want to keep spending money to engage with this hobby.
Right.
I think that's a better way to engage with it, right? So one was the restoration, which I was doing, and then since I had this collection put together, and I had thought very deeply about the collection, and I was, every time I bought a pen, I did a lot of research on its history. I thought, why not showcase these pens? So I started showcasing it on a thread on FPN again. And that really picked up. It has about 18,000 views now. I never expected anyone to care about it. But when I saw that interest, I said, why not put it on a platform that better showcases the pictures, that has a better format, more accessible.
Right. Yeah.
So I said, let me put it on a website. And I think it'll be nice because people that want to see pictures of really wonderful pens or exciting pens, it's hard for them to always have access to it. And I said, it'll be fun for me also. I'll have to dig deeper, do more research. So it'll be a nice project for me. So I started with that idea. And then I thought, there's a bunch of people on FPN that have amazing pens. why don't I ask them if they would like to share pictures, and then I can write about the history of it and feature their pens. So this one collector, Ariel Zuniga, there's a post on FPN called the Rare Ones, under the
Okay.
Mob forum.
Okay.
And this guy has ridiculous, pens. I mean, mind-blowing stuff. So I wrote to him. I said, I thought he wouldn't reply even to me. I said, I'm doing this. What would you like to share? He's like, yeah, I'd be more than happy to share. And he sent me like 10 pictures of amazing pens the next day. So I was like, whoa, maybe this could be something. I can ask people from around the world. And so I started doing that. And then he put me in touch with another guy, Jordi Lopez in Barcelona. And now Jordi Lopez has a crazy collection as well. So I started he was like, yeah, of course, I'm happy to share. And he put his pens, and then I started asking random people on FPN, and people were like, yeah, take it. And, like I said, it's such a generous community. Everyone's so kind and sharing. Got those pens up. And then I said, let me get interviews with some of, the experts. So, I have books from these people. So I bought a book on the Mont Blancs in Spain. And
right. Yeah.
I was like, I can't get this guy's email ID. So I literally wrote him a postal letter.
Okay.
He wrote back to me, and his interview is up now, And then Paul Lund, who wrote about Mont Blancs in Denmark. Then I did something with him. I did something with Francis Goosens. Most recently, I've written to Rossler. So if you guys know this book, it's like the Bible for Mont Blanc, right? So I wrote to Rossler himself. His granddad was the main designer of Mont Blanc back in the day. So I wrote to him, and he's going to do an interview. So I think that's just how the website kept growing.
Fantastic. It's a very comprehensive, sort of an encyclopedia for Moblas, I should say, and it's still building up.
I'm so glad. Thanks.
Yeah. So I think Pradeep also has a few questions for you.
So some of what I had to talk about, you actually covered in your previous question. But I wanted to know about your experience meeting all these collectors, because you have met some of the most well-known collectors, who are legends in their own right. They might not be known to the people in general, but the people who are into collecting, they are like practically meeting the leaders in the hobby. So how has that been for you? How did you go about meeting them, and how was it actually meeting them?
It's amazing. Honestly, I think the website helped a little, but I just think they're so generous, honestly, that every time I would reach out to Paul Lund, and I was no one. Like, he didn't have to write back to me, this guy, but he was so kind. He would write back long emails and explain, if I had doubts about some mysteries or some confusions, with the.
Right.
You would just write back. Then, Ariel, like I said, Jordi Lopez, I met him in Barcelona when I went with my family for a visit. I met Jordi, he showed me his pens. I mean, I'm holding pens that there are one-of-ones available in the world. There's no more pieces left, or like ridiculous pieces. So kind and generous with it. Then there was people like Osman Sumar now, who who I engage a lot with. I buy pens mostly from him now, because I really trust him. He's probably the best, most well-known restorer of Mont Blancs and collectors and sellers of Mont Blancs. Tom Westerick, he's been really generous with me. I WhatsApp him any question, and he immediately shares information. So they're really kind, generous people. It's so encouraging. They've all been so encouraging. I wrote to Barry Gabay. If you guys love 149s, if you're interested in 149, he's written the most seminal articles on Mont Blanc 149s, right? Always. He's like the expert in the 149. And I wrote to him before the website was even up. And I said, I'm putting a website up, and I would love an article from you. And he wrote this elaborate article. The interview's on my website. You can see it. These guys are just so generous. It's been heartwarming, and it's just so wonderful working with them.
Now, from what you say, it seems like been a really wonderful journey. I mean, the personal touch makes it very special, and I think it's been great. I mean, your website and your Instagram are proof that it's been great. So that's fantastic. So like my next question, I am not really into vintages, mainly because I'm in awe every time I use a good vintage pen, but I can't make head or tail of it. So could you share some tips or like a primer on how to go about buying vintage pens? and more importantly, what to look out for? Because like most people selling vintages as well across counter don't really seem to know much about what they are selling. So what is it that one needs to look out for? And, what is it that you feel a person who's just getting into vintages, or even a seasoned person, should actually keep an eye out for?
That's a really good question, and honestly, it's something I learned the hard way through my experience. Well, so there are a couple of things. One is, I think eBay is a good place to buy when you are working with mid-tier and lower tier, like $100 to say even $500, $600 pens. I'm comfortable buying from eBay. eBay is very good about taking care of the buyer. Okay, so as long as you are super clear with the seller before he sells something to you, eBay will just send it back if it's not as described. So what I then learned to do is, just before I pull the trigger on a pen, I would write with a standard set of like 10 questions. And they were very precise. They would be like, are all the parts period correct and model correct to this specific pen? Like that specific, because what they do often is, the sellers, is they will have a Franken pen. So the pen is fine, but let's say the nib is from a decade later. And how would you know? It fits perfectly, right? But it's not the same decade. Or, it'll be...
Siamack, I'm sorry, I'm just going to stop you there. What exactly is a Franken pen? Many people might not actually know that term.
So Franken pen, the term comes from Frankenstein, obviously, and it's putting different pieces of different pens together into one pen, right? And there's nothing wrong with it. If you're looking for a user pen that's nicely priced, that's wonderful. You get a pen with 1 decade later nib and 1 decade before clip, and whatever, what's a big deal. But if you're a collector, then you want to make sure all the parts are correct to that particular model and are period correct, right? So if you don't know already that this part should be like this, and the changes are very small sometimes, right? Very minor. It's hard. I still get confused sometimes. It's just good to ask very clearly to the seller. So whether it's eBay or whether it's someone you're doing it on WhatsApp with, right? I like to always put like a list of questions, very clearly, things like, and places that I know are problems. So like I'll ask them about the cap lip. Are there any chips or micro cracks, right? Sometimes they don't look at it themselves. I will tell them things as specific as, have you inspected it with a loop, right? Because sometimes they'll say I didn't see it. And then I take a loop out immediately and check, and there's a hairline crack, So I'll ask them what cracks, this, that, whatever, piston is working or not, everything in that list. So that's one piece of advice I'd give you. Always put this list together, ask explicitly. eBay is a decent place. If you want to buy more expensive pens, you should directly get in touch with the top dealers. And I think it's better to pay a premium to them, 20%, 30%, whatever it is. But you know what you're getting is legit. And you don't want to mess around at $1,500 pen, $2,000 pen. You don't want to mess around at that point with eBay. So those are some tips I have. And the third thing is, it's important to, when you're buying a pen and it has some small problems, you might get a good deal out of it. So now I've developed a sort of understanding of what is repairable. So there are some things that are repairable. Like you might have local people who can repair it for you. Then it's good to buy that pen because you'll get a good deal and you can get it repaired for cheap. But there are some things wrong with pens that really are deal breakers. You're never going to repair the pen to be just like it was or close to it. You know what I'm saying? So you need to develop this knowledge of what is repairable and what is not repairable, and just don't touch the pens that are non-repairable. So those are some tips that I would give you broadly on how to buy vintage pens.
There, right? While actually buying a fountain pen, as to what you would consider repairable, what you would not consider repairable.
Yeah. So
and what is the trade-off?
Right. So repairable to me is like, say, the piston cork seal of the piston is not working.
Right.
The piston moves, but it doesn't pull water. That's easy. It's repairable. Right. Like I can repair that. You know what I'm saying? Or the sack is not changed. You can repair that, right? Or the it doesn't write well, but there's no crack in the nib or there's no bent tines, or that means there's some alignment has to be done, or it's just a dirty pen, it's nasty looking, you can probably clean that up. Or let's say it has some micro scratches here and there, you can buff it up. So stuff like that is still pretty doable. But if it's got like a crack across the body or the cap lip, honestly, no matter what you do, is never going to be quite the same. So you want to watch out for stuff like that, chips, cracks on the nib. Even you can get it laser welded, whatever, it's not going to be the same. But things like retipping a nib, let's say the nib tip is gone, you can still get it retipped for like €100 with shipping. You can get it retipped, So you need to know what you're buying and how much the repair will cost.
Right. That was interesting. Coming to the next topic, say once you got your fountain pen, how does one go about caring for a vintage fountain pen? Is there anything special that one needs to do as opposed to the contemporary pens? I mean, I'm sure you don't throw them in a bag and just leave them with your keys, but besides the obvious, like how does one go about caring for fountain?
Yeah. Well, my pen. Little more than.
Sorry, we lost you. We lost you there for a bit.
Sorry, am I back?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. I think now that I have a collection that is reasonably valuable, it makes sense for me to invest in its care a little more than, say, a normal person, a normal collector would. So what I do is I have a dehumidifier that you get for camera lenses, right? It's like this little mini fridge, and you plug it in, and it basically controls the humidity inside. So I set the humidity at 55. Right now, outside the humidity is probably like 80 or 90 or something crazy like that. I think in Mumbai, or places like Mumbai at least, the humidity is something I get worried about with pens. So I keep it in a dry place, basically, and I keep it in a dark place. So I have a black cover for the front of the dehumidifier so that no sun gets in, because sun oxidizes the pen, especially if they're hard rubber. It'll start changing the black into brown slowly over time. And you just want to protect it from light, and you want to protect it from humidity, and of course extreme heat, if you can somehow control that to some extent. So cool, dark, and not so humid is something you want to keep in mind. You should also know the material that you have. So you got to be careful. Like if you have an ebonite pen, a hard rubber pen, you got to know that if it touches water, there's a chance that it'll oxidize and start turning brown right away. I've literally had pens when I was a novice, and I wanted to wash them for some reason when I got them. They were black. They literally touched water and they turned brown. Not all pens do that. It's a little extreme, but they will all oxidize if you put them in water. So you need to know your materials. Like you can't have alcohol around celluloid pens. It's going to be over, right? You need to know what materials you can use to clean pens and what you shouldn't. So you have to know the materials of your pen very well. Simple things I've seen people do is like turn the cap on too tight and keep pens away. Again, you got to be careful, because these pens, because of our heat and then humidity, they're contracting and expanding constantly, right? You sleep in an AC room at night, it's contracting, getting dry. In the morning, suddenly you take it out and go for a walk, it's like insanely humid and hot, right? So this stuff, this expanding, contracting is going to mess up the pen. And if you tighten it too much, and that's when cracks and all that musty is going to happen. So you just want to be really gentle with them. You should use them. There's no point hiding them inside like some treasure. I take my pens out and do whatever I want to with them. But be careful of light, be careful of water. Cool, dry place that's not so humid is ideal. And just treat it gently. These are really old pens. And ink, the ink, I'm very careful with the inks. I use like Waterman inks, like the gentlest inks. I don't use any musty inks with them.
Well, the point about Waterman ink seems to be consistent. Everybody recommends Waterman inks for all sorts of delicate pens. There was really good inks. So thank you so much for answering our questions. I mean, it's been fantastic. A few things we knew about, few things were absolutely new. I mean, I saw a few pens which I didn't even know existed. So that was fantastic. And your insight about buying versus collecting, and great. So we have a set of questions coming up now from a few of our viewers. So BC123 says, which pen are you buying now?
Oh yeah, that's a great question, man. I got some amazing. There is one pen which is called which is a 245. So
Okay.
there's a series. There's a it's a very popular series. Sorry, it's a 235. So it's a 234.5. I don't know if you guys have seen. It's a very popular pen, wonderful pen. And there's a 236, but there was a 235 that was made. And they made it, and they probably realized this is a stupid idea. Like, why do we have a 232, a 234.5, and then a 236, and why do we have 235? They probably realized a stupid mistake. So this 235 is a super rare pen, and it was probably the first piston pen that they ever made, Montblanc ever made. Right, it's the one that started the whole thing. And when I asked Osman, I said, Osman, you think you can get me a 235? And he's quite a curt guy. I find it funny. He's quite a curt guy. He's like this, German Turkish guy, and he's like, stop asking me about unicorn pens. Buy a 234 and enjoy it. And then after I was like, really, is that rare? After 2 weeks, he was at a pen show, and he's like, I found your unicorn pen. I was like, see, there you go. So he has it with him. I was supposed to get it in May. I was supposed to go for a German pen show. He had that gift for me, and he had 2 beautiful safeties, Astoria safeties. Astoria pens are a sub-brand of Montblanc towards the end of their life. Right. Safeties, one in silver and one in gold, rolled gold. So those were waiting for me, but the lockdown messed it up. But yeah, they're going to come to me at some point.
That's great. So we have a next question from Mr. Sagar Shankar. He says, hi, Siamack, do speak a bit about your learning experience on restorations.
Yeah.
What you might have learned in the journey of yours.
Honestly, Fountain Pen Network is an amazing resource. I learned, honestly, everything I needed to from Fountain Pen Network because you can put a post up if you see a roadblock. And to like Francis Guzens and Rob Zahn and the experts, 30 years, 40 years experience are writing to you and telling you how to restore your pen. I mean, it's ridiculous, you know what I'm saying? So that's really how I started learning. And then, of course, I bought a book like, it's just good to have a book. Like, this is the best book I think you can buy by Lawrence, just to have at home. And the only way to learn, like I said in my last workshop that I did with FPAI, I said, if you guys want to learn how to fix a $600, $1,000 pen, you got to try fixing a $1,000 pen. Unfortunately, I haven't done that. I tried fixing a $1,000 pen of my own and I broke it. So, the best way to do is to practice, but these are the resources you want to use to start learning, and they're awesome.
Right. So we have another question from Mr. Dipendu Chandra. Why do you think fountain pen manufacturers have stopped being innovative with filling systems or stopped using even existing varieties of filling? This is a question we keep saying very often, especially about the nibs as well, not just filling systems.
Yeah. So the filling systems, at least, I think they've all now settled on a filling system that is most foolproof, like easiest to use, most consistent in usage. Like the telescoping piston I showed you is not easy. It's not easy to use. There's like a trick to using it, and you have to do some masti, and it demands your attention. And not everyone who buys a pen now is going to be interested in figuring out. So I think they've all come to a conclusion on what is the most consistent technology to use, and B, what is the most economical. So the technology now is super economical, right? I think that's why, unfortunately.
So it's got less to do with the limitations of technology and more to do with the economics of it.
I think it's more to do with economics and just honestly better technology. I guess that's what you call better technology, right? It's more consistent. So yeah. So the toughest pen is I answered it earlier.
This was Subodh's pen, right?
Subodh's pen is one of the toughest. Subodh was the successful tough one. The other tough one. I don't want to remember them.
So Nikhil Raj has a question. What's the best fountain pen book that you recommend, which gives more details about history on fountain pens?
So there is the book, like if it's not Mont Blanc, there's a book called Fountain Pens of the World by Lambrou, right?
And
I have that book. Wonderful. My God, the pictures and everything is just amazing. And that he says he spent $500,000 making that book. So
wow, really?
that's what he says. I read it in the preface or somewhere, I don't know where. But you can tell like the pictures and the quality of the book and just the it's a great Bible to sort of have in your home. Wonderful coffee table book, fascinating book. But if it's Mont Blanc, then honestly, it doesn't get much better than this. It's amazing. This book is by Rossler and Walraffen. It's amazing. And the book I showed you earlier, which is the Mont Blanc in Denmark, is just, though it's very specific, it's just very well written and wonderful pictures in it.
Well, I have seen you with the book and the actual pen next to it.
Yeah.
When you had the beautiful display of pens at your place.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So Mihir has a question for you. What intrigues you about vintage pens and vintage MBs in particular?
It's
because
so
we have all seen those pretty Schaeffers and a Nakaya even that you had in your collection, and you did a complete pivot to Mont Blancs. So
yeah. Well, vintage pens, I think there's something just really fascinating about having something 80, 90, 100 years old that still works. There's something very romantic about that idea, right? It's just romantic in a way, like who used this? Like who are the 20 people before me that had it? Like pens go on discount when they have the owner's name engraved on it. Sometimes when you buy vintage pens, they have like the engraving of the owner's name on it. And they go cheaper because people don't like the engraving. I love the engraving. Like you give me a pen with the engraving, don't tell anyone this, but I'll probably pay you more for it because it's like this. My 146. Let's see if you guys can see, but you see there's a name here, Wolf Langner, right? And I love that. It's like, so who's this guy who had the pen before me? It's just fascinating. So that's what fascinates me about vintage pens, and the fact that they were made so well that they can work today. To me, it's like it epitomizes just like a high standard in technology and engineering. So that's why I like vintage pens and Mont Blancs, honestly, because I felt they were really innovative with their design. And I've had all those other pens, and I love the other brands as well. I won't lie, but I feel like the diversity of design, the technology, and the design was just wonderful. It really appeals to me. That's why I love vintage Mont Blancs. I despise modern Mont Blancs, to be honest with you. I love the vintage ones.
So Dr. Shreyans Patel has a question. What's the Mont Blanc that one must have if they are a user?
Yeah, honestly, if you're looking for
so let's rule out the modern ones.
Yeah. No, but this is a 342. It is simple. It is very humble, and it is reasonable to purchase. You get a 344 as well if you like bigger pens. It's from the 1950s. You can get this for like $120, $130. And this pen is a tank. It's made of thermal plastic, so it's no drama, and the piston works beautifully. No servicing, nothing. Amazing workhorse. If you have vintage Mont Blancs, you should have a 342 or 344.
All right, great. I think that will be a good place for a few of us to start from. So Adit Kamath has a question for you.
Adit, so, modern.
Is there any modern pen you just cannot buy?
I can't buy any of them.
Does anything catch your fancy at all?
It's ulta. Is there any more? Honestly, like the most of the limited editions and special editions that Mont Blanc comes out with, some of them are just horrendous. I don't know who's thinking what, and I don't know who's buying those pens. It's nuts. But again, it's so subjective, right? Like, I'm not talking about this like it's an objective truth. But I find those pens useless. I don't like pens that have brass or metal sections, and I'm seeing Mont Blanc doing that very often with its fancy pens now. I don't know why, because I know in 30 years that'll look like crap, right? I've seen what happens to vintage pens with those parts on it. So I don't like those kinds of pens.
Yeah, the Mont Blanc special editions have been quite polarizing, actually.
Yeah, you hate it or you love it, right?
Yeah. So Shreyans has got another interesting question. They say, are all Waterman inks safe or just the blue inks? What about the turquoise?
I just go with what Richard Binder has said. He was like the first guy I learned from. So when I learned restoration, his website was #1 and FPN. I didn't say Richard Binder first. I should have said that, but he was like, his website's amazing. And he talks about black and blue. And I've always stuck with that. So when I restore people's pens and I'm testing and, while restoring, that's all I use. Pens that have ink windows, my old pens with ink windows, I will just use blue and black. And pens that don't have ink windows, I'll be a little more, sort of risky, and I will use red inks and whatever. But I only use Mont Blanc inks for the most part, not because I think they're better necessarily. I like I have a whole collection of the bottles and whatever. And that's how I go. So I think blue and black are the safest, and the bright colors start getting dicey.
There's another interesting question. Are you planning to include a 139 in your collection?
That's a great question. I had a 139 for a very short period of time. It had a tiny crack. The seller didn't tell me about that crack. I took out my loop. I was like, dude, take the pen back. And
we know about that story.
Yeah. So then I started thinking I have to have a 139. It's like the absolute most legendary pen, right? And then I was thinking, what do you like about the 139? I like the tie clip. I like the top hat. I like the, I want a steel nib. And I like the ink window. I like the telescopic piston. I like, hey, the 136 has all of that. So why are you just getting caught up in this, But the 139 has the silver rings on the cap, right? But I have a 149 with the silver rings on the cap. So I was like, hey, is it adding enough diversity for 3x the price or 2x the price of a 136? And the answer was no. And so I said, look, now you're just being vain about this. So, we're going to have 136 instead. So I have a 136 instead, which actually hits all the spot. And I got it with the case too. Came with the case. Yeah, and I just got the 136 instead.
That's great. That's a nice way to look at things. I've got a question for you. What's your second hobby or passion? I think a few of us know about it, but
yeah, thanks for asking. I have so many. I'm always looking for new hobbies, and I've always had hobbies. So another hobby of mine is martial arts. I've been doing Muay Thai for about a decade. Started learning when I was studying abroad, and I do that. And I do some weapons, Filipino martial arts weapons. I love that. I also love Olympic weightlifting. So it's a very specific kind of weightlifting. Those are my passions apart from fountain pens, and I really want to get into woodworking. So that's in the pipeline. I tried my hand at restoring mechanical watches. Subodh knows it didn't do well, and I think maybe that's a good thing for now. So I'm going to pause on that one. But these are in the pipeline.
Interesting. We would love to see some wooden articles from you.
Yeah, hopefully one day.
Okay, there's another question. What's your take on the lawsuits by Mont Blanc on indie artists who modified their pens?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't really have a take on that. I think this is just like, that's what the law is. The law is what it is, and if Mont Blanc wants to come down, I think it's kind of stupid though, because I really don't see Mont Blanc losing revenues because of these guys who take like weeks to make one pen to one buyer. I don't know how it's going to affect Mont Blanc's pockets. I think, in fact, if anything, these pens create so much buzz online on Instagram and other sites that it attracts people who aren't even looking at Mont Blanc. They're like, whoa, what a pen, and then they think of Mont Blanc. So I don't know, but I guess Mont Blanc knows what it has to do about it. So, it's legal rights.
I mean, I think that's a question best answered by them. So
yeah.
Okay. Mr. Suman Saraf has a question. How did the watch restoration go, and how do you compare it to vintage pen restoration? I think you answered that.
Infinitely more complex than pen restoration. Fascinating. I did a whole online course on it, and I dismantled an Omega Seamaster from the 1970s, and just one stupid part messed it up. These parts are so tiny. My God, this is like back-breaking work. You're looking through like these loops and this tiny, and this one part has just ruined my whole experience. So it is really hard. So both, I'm very impressed with how you do this. One day I will come back to that hobby, but not now.
Great. Great. It's been a fascinating session. Siamack, thank you so much for your time.
It was so much fun. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Same here. And we look forward to hearing a lot from you about your new pens, your next hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be a pleasure. Yeah. If you can keep doing these sessions, maybe once we will do a live restoration or something simple, maybe.
For sure.
That's a fantastic idea.
Very interesting, actually.
That will be really amazing. Siamack, I did want to ask you one last question, and that was, which is that pen from 1908 that you're still looking for?
You want me to show it to you? It's on my website if you like.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, let me show this to you. It's amazing. At least I find it amazing. Let's see. So it's a sliding barrel Mont Blanc, and see, this is it.
Sorry, did you say a sliding barrel?
Yeah, it's a sliding barrel.
Wow.
It's a very cool mechanism, and it's really hard to find because obviously it's so old, right? We're talking about 120, almost 110-year-old pen, and it was made for a very short time, and so it's super premium. Like the biggest of the biggest collectors will have them, and anytime it comes up, because it's rare to find it, anytime it comes up for sale, there are some collectors who will just drop insane amounts of money, right? Just buy whatever. They don't care. They don't negotiate. They just drop it.
What is it called?
So it's called, I'll just show it to you. The one I'm showing you is on my website. It's a pen that Tom shared with me. Okay. Can you guys see?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So at that time, Mont Blanc didn't have the star. So you see this red cap here instead.
Right.
Just a red top. And this looks a lot like the more safety pens, if you think about it, right? Interesting feed here. It's sort of like a safety, but you have to twist the barrel. This sliding barrel, it sort of slides up as you twist it, and then the nib comes out. So this one is a 166, I guess, but really people just know these as the sliding barrel. And this is a number 6 right here. I mean, this pen must be selling for like at least 10,000. This size is a big size also. Must be like $10,000-$15,000 if you find it. And the tiny one will be for less. So yeah.
That was amazing. I hope you are able to get that someday.
Yeah. And I hope we get to see it.
Yeah.
Looking at vintage pens and knowing you for the last couple of years now, there was one pen that you had put up one day. It was some Mont Blanc with the lapis lazuli color, and I thought, okay, this looks amazing, and I'm going to ask Siamack how much it costs, and I'm going to go for it. And then somebody asked you how much it costed, and then it was, I believe, like $1,000 or $2,000 something.
Oh, it must be much more. The lapis lazuli is like 4-5.
Yeah, so obviously, the one vintage pen that I really like and I really want to go for was completely beyond my reckoning.
I liked it, man.
So anyway, thank you so much for joining us today, and it was a wonderful session.
For me,
Going
I really
through so
enjoyed
many vintage pens and all the knowledge and then information that you have shared is just so amazing and very fascinating.
That's a
I
pleasure.
remember that one evening shared, one evening that some of us were at your place and going through some of your pens. What a wonderful evening that was. So
Thanks.
I hope everybody,
a
all
lovely
the
display
viewers,
of pens, and it was fascinating. It was really fascinating.
I'm so glad you enjoyed.
yes, definitely. So thank you again, Siamack, for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon. And stay safe.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot, Siamack.
Thanks for
Thank you
doing
so
this.
much. Take care.
It's so awesome that you're doing the stuff that engages us in our hobby at this time. So I'm really appreciative of the work that's going into this from you guys. It's really awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.
And to all the viewers, thank you for joining us today on this wonderful session. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. We will be coming out with more and more of such sessions, and I hope you will join us then as well. So, as once again and for the last time, thank you. Have a good night. Bye. Take care.